Hey y'all, I'm Corey Ames. Welcome to this late spring garden tour here in San Antonio, Texas. This tour was recorded at the tail end of May, right after a summer-like hot stretch. And so in this video, I want to show you what's been looking good, what's resilient, and some of the changes and strategies that I've made as I experiment with implementing a near fully Texas native or adapted landscape. And so if you're trying to build a garden yourself that thrives in our climate, saves water, supports wildlife, then I think this tour should give you a few good ideas. And if you want to get a more hands-on level of support in designing and building your own Texas native plant landscape, I got two resources that I think you'll love. First, a free 7-day email course, which you can sign up for now at ensembletexas.com/TXNative. That's going to walk you through step-by-step the process to start a Texas native plant landscape designed to help you save time and money, and most importantly, a lot of dead plants. Second, I'm going to be releasing a paid workshop soon. That's going to walk you through my whole process from site planning to plant selection and layout. I'm going to be sharing the 7 things that I wish I knew before getting started with Texas native plant landscaping myself. So you can pre-order that workshop now using the link in the description, and if you do order early before it's released, you'll get to submit me questions directly, in which I'm going to answer in the workshop material itself, and then specifically in a bonus pre-recorded Q&A session following that. So with all that, let's jump into the garden tour. Let's go ahead and start perhaps here on the furthest front street side part of my property, which is always the hottest and the driest. Direct sun just about all day. There's some sporadic shade that's happening on the edges at different periods of the day. But we put something new in the ground here, which I'm quite happy with. Skeletonleaf Goldeneye. So this is a plant here that really thrives in direct sun. And so I believe I put this in the fall of last year, and I have yet to give it any water this year at all. So watering it just during an establishment period, and it's really been thriving. And so the next move for me here, I think, and if you're looking at this, everything's surrounded by asphalt, and so the heat is radiating off that asphalt to these plants. It's really hot and intense and dry. I want to put some Blackfoot Daisy here or something similar, kind of on this edge to start mounding and likewise be a good source of life here in an area of our property where that has often been limited. If it's not these plants, then it's been grass that is green for the duration of the very early spring, but starts to die out as soon as we start to hit summer. So Skeletonleaf Goldeneye is a great one, I think, and it's a little bit of a kind of small shrubbing habit here. I put 3 in together, and it's really started to mound together well, quite nicely. So good one for some of those kind of hell strippish like parts of your property. Of course, one that I've talked about here on my channel before, likewise, here's the Acanthus, which this year I actually pruned this one all the way back to the ground in the off season in that late winter. And it's continued to come back in this nice, very strong, compact shape. But this is one of my largest Acanthus I have on the property, and I think that's because of the quantity of sun that it receives here. It really gets blasted in it. It certainly loves it. The thing that I do like about Acanthus too, when you're talking about some plants turning into more plants for you, this can be a drawback for many people, and that's understandable, but the Acanthus is one to shoot out its seed capsules or its seeds from its seed capsules late in the fall season. And you will see small Acanthus sprouting up all over your landscape in a couple years. So for some, I get it, totally a drawback, but for me, where I have more space, sometimes it feels than I can handle, I'm happy for plants like the Acanthus to do a little bit of work for me. So something to keep in mind with that, a pro for some and a con for others. Transitioning here, I think that there's a good lesson in one of my failures here on our landscape, similar in the same area of our property, a part that's brutally hot, gets direct sun, can be very, very dry. It's tough to establish new plants here. One, and here's a lesson, which is something that I also go into the workshop and the email mini course that's linked down below, but thinking about the strategy of where you're planting particular things and at what time, and in relationship to your daily habits and routines, right? And so This area of our property is the furthest out from our house. It's close to the street. It's not too comfortable to be out in, to be honest, unless it's, you know, the colder parts of the year, which is, you know, something to keep in mind, why you might certainly avoid planting as you get further into spring. But I planted here a Weesatch tree. And yes, that, I mean, this little collection of cut stumps and little branches here is a Weesatch tree. I thought that it might be, you know, set up perfectly here in this really brutal part of our property to be something that would be resilient, get established quite easily, you know, and help perhaps transition us as to provide some early shade and as well, you know, nitrogen fixation to feed the soil down here to help set the stage for maybe more established species later on. Nonetheless, this tree here still just about all but died. You can see that it is coming back here really on life support to some degree, but it was much bigger than this when I put it into the ground. And so, you know, an important lesson here, I think, is thinking about where you are trying to establish things. How does that relate to your daily rhythm, right? This is an area that we don't frequent on our property. And so I gotta be very considerate as to when I plant this area of our property. Because if I'm gonna put something in later spring when temperatures are rising, you know, the transplant shock is much higher for plants, even very resilient species like a Weesatch. And so if I can't get out here just because of, you know, the rhythm of the day, you know, busy with work and all that kind of stuff, it might all but die, you know, and I'm surprised it's hanging on. I thought it was done. So, you know, it'll come back for us, but it's going to be a long journey back. And that is, I think, an important lesson to consider. You know, I probably should have planted this in a different time of year. I think I put it in the ground maybe too late in spring. And so thinking about even the most resilient species, if not at the right time, the right plant, the right time, in the right place, you can find yourself failing when really you'd have, you know, no other reason, when you should have, you know, an incredible opportunity at success, right? I thought that's the right plant. I thought that's, you know, the right type of conditions for it, but I just didn't get it planted in the ground at the right time. And so really it was an uphill battle to try to establish it. It'll come back, but I want to show you something else. This here as well is a Weesatch tree. It is a volunteer. It's sprouted up. And so as I mentioned again, you know, we're in the similar quadrant of our property where this is a pretty desolate area. You know, I've tried to kill some grasses and stuff out here and start planting and do some things differently. I have a better strategy for that moving forward, but this has never been watered by my hand a single day in its life. And it looks very healthy and strong and resilient. So that's an interesting lesson, I think, that one, sometimes it benefits to have the patience, you know, there's sometimes neighborhood restrictions on this kind of thing, but to have the patience to see what sprouts up and grows in your yard. And so this will work for me, thinking about my overall landscape design, and so I think I'm gonna leave it. And a Weesatch tree, a lot of people might not think that is like a highly coveted species or resource, but you know, you'd be surprised what sprouts up on your property if you're able to be patient, let things overgrow a bit, and give it some time. You know, especially in the context of, you know, this type size tree here would be 40 to 60 bucks depending on the nursery. And so it saves you a little money, and it's vastly healthier by sprouting up on its own than something that we've transplanted in from the nursery stock. So these types of plants that sprout up, look out for them, you know, and see if they're small seedlings or saplings. This thing will grow just as fast, if not faster, than something that I purchased at the nursery at the same size and put in the ground today. So an important lesson, be patient. And this is something that I talk about in the email course and the workshop to come. There's a lot of reward to being able to wait and watch and see what happens on your landscape over time. You never know what's going to sprout up. And I've had a lot of little instances like this where there's interesting species, something that you'd, you know, pay a lot of money for at the nursery to buy in the same sort of quantity. And so another thing that I want to talk about too, kind of in the context of, you know, playing the long game and waiting for things, maybe making changes to your landscape, you know, doing it a little bit aggressively if you need to. This whole area here, another part, kind of a hell strip type part of our property, is just about all transplanted from other parts where I've kind of retracted some decisions that I made. Most of these are these silver kind of desperado, I think is the variety type of Texas sage. And so these are likewise kind of coming back from the dead. It's something with a shallower root system, that's for sure. And so transplanting it wasn't necessarily difficult, but I was quite worried putting them in the ground that things weren't leafing out for some significant amount of time, especially when the other sage that I have on my property were doing just fine. But I moved them, you know, I dug them up in the dead of winter and moved them, and here they are coming back. Of course, it's better to get something into the right spot on your property the first time, but have no fear. There are opportunities, provided that you're careful to do it in the right time of year, and I would say just about for all species, that's going to be in the dead of winter, most likely. So I think I dug these up and moved them in January. That as well, here, desert willow. And I pruned it back, and so it was just about this size in the ground last year from where I dug it up, and I'll be honest, I didn't get the root ball completely intact. But here we are. Many of these species are really quite resilient. I got a small golden lead ball tree here that I'll be excited to see, first bloom. I also have a red yucca here that I've moved as well. And so, mistakes can happen, and it's not necessarily the end of the world. It's not ideal to transplant and move things, so don't necessarily count on that strategy. But keep in mind that it is a strategy. It is kind of a escape hatch, so to speak, if you put something in the wrong spot. I'd find a way to transplant that, and doing that at the right time of the year is really important. And so elsewhere here, a combination that I'd like to show you at one of my rainwater harvesting berms. And these are a bit out of bloom. The blooms are spent right now. I could potentially prune these back and give them another round to potentially shoot out blooms. This Zexmania here, which I've done a video on in the past. I'd recommend checking that out. Likewise, my Anacacho orchid tree here, it was absolutely beautiful this year. I've done a video on that tree as well, so I'd recommend checking that out. But alongside here in the berm, I'd almost want to round this out more completely with all the Zexmania in that. Maybe think of a different ground cover, but sometimes there's more you can get out of just having less in massed plantings. But here I have some Lindheimer muley, three big ones that I find have been a nice complement along the side here to this Anacacho orchid tree and Zexmania combo. The Zexmania at the base here at this rainwater harvesting berm, a little bit of open space that I'd like to plant into so I'd have to worry less about weeding. But that's been a combination I've been quite happy about. And generally, these berms, which I dug out originally when we moved in this property, have done quite well. Let me show you a couple other of them that I'm quite happy with, and maybe some improvements that I'd make from there. So we have this combination too. This is a Texas redbud, which I produced a video on earlier this year. And the combination for me here was coralberry, which has done phenomenally well, and we're here on a slight slope. And so we have some coralberry, and then at the base of that rainwater harvesting berm are these Turk's cap. And these Turk's cap have done phenomenally well at the base of this berm. And so the idea here is that the water from our driveway here, we have more driveway than we could possibly need, runs off, water from that driveway runs off and then ultimately seeps down to the bottom of this berm. And that's going to be to the benefit of the Turk's cap and as well the coralberry and ultimately to the Texas redbud. But if I was going to do anything differently, I would probably continue to mass out the coralberry. It is spreading really quite nicely. A lot of these here are new plants. And this one is definitely a plant here that, in the right conditions, it will start to spread out with many of these legs, here, and essentially create new plants. So this one right in here is not planted at all. That's the mother plant right behind it, and it's done quite well. So in a perfect world, I'd maybe have probably 3 more mother plants around this one, because I have some of this spare space that I'd like to have covered. I don't want to weed. I'd rather plant than weed, and that's ultimately better, I think, overall for both wildlife, just more opportunity to feed off coral berries, and the host plant for I forget which butterfly it is, but for their caterpillars, and then as well just for water retention too. But this coral berry's doing a lot here. It's crawling every which way and expanding, with little trouble. So with time, I'm not the most patient landscaper, but with time, perhaps this will fill out. It just looks a bit weedy, and that's what happens in open spaces, right? That's really where nature wants to go. It wants to cover its bare soil to the extent that it has the ability to do so. And so here's another berm here that I'm really quite proud of, and I think this combination is maybe worth mimicking, but it's a good use of this stump here that was, that we created a berm around. Again, backing up here so you can kind of get a full view. It's still bare on the berm itself. There is some various vine here that it always tends to climb up and try to cover it, which is great. Helps with erosion. We also have some flame acanthus sprouting up here, I think from to my left of this shot anyways, but we'll leave those and see how we can build around it. But we have the inland sea oats here, and we have a Mexican buckeye, and we have elbow bush beyond that inland sea oats. And I think the interesting thing that I think is worth sharing is that one side on this stump is inland sea oats grown completely from seed, from our own seed, as you can start to see the green seed heads forming here early in the year. That will be seed that could be harvested in the fall, and I have another success story with that elsewhere on the landscape. But one side is completely from seed, and one is bought from the nursery, and it's the left side that is bought from the nursery. The right side is grown completely from seed. And so it's really rounded out along this stump quite well. I spread more seed here in the middle this last year, and we have some more coming up. I think if anything, I'll probably continue to round that out all the way around the stump. The elbow bush is doing a great job at extending itself and continuing to grow as well. But I do like those inland sea oats sitting there, and I have long thought about maybe etching out a bird bath of some kind into that stump, but that's a project for a later day. I like the stump there, of course, wish there was a tree there. But it's been a good thing to kind of build and construct this berm around. This Mexican buckeye has really, really bushed out. I'm gonna let it grow in more of its bush habit than try and prune it into a tree. I've seen it in its full bush habit. I really like the way that it looks. One of my family members has one in their landscape. It's a beautiful, large bush, potentially small tree if you want it. Here's another area I want to show you, something that I worked on for a significant amount of time last year, and that's my pollinator garden, which has become a bit dominated here early this year by the common sunflower, which of course I didn't plant, but it's been one that's welcome to my landscape. Something that a friend of mine, Monica Mackley, who wrote a really exceptional book called Plants with Purpose. I'll link down in the description to that. I think you should check that out. She's likewise a San Antonio, Texas-based naturalist and very invested in native plant landscaping. Lots of different species in here. I have Forsythia sage, which is not a native species, but adapted. And for me, it's done quite well. I haven't touched it with any extra water. And that for me is, what I think is a species that might be deserving to stay. And so, maybe it doesn't have the impact that it could on, very specific insects and fauna in the area, but I love it. We got a couple red yucca in here, and it looks like we'll get one of our first blooms of the year. We also got some nolina in here, creeping up around that sunflower. Got a little trellis with some crossvine here that bloomed quite nicely this year. I also added a little wildlife pond. I overplanted my wildlife pond in my backyard, and I moved this swamp milkweed and pickler weed in here. I might have one more thing in here, but something small perhaps, and I need to get some fish in there as well. But this has been fun to have. I've seen more birds come in here to take a drink, and it's, you know, just a unique extra aspect of a pollinator garden, I think, is to have some water. It adds, you know, that kind of final component of life, I think, to any sort of landscape or specific garden space. As well, we got some autumn sage here that's done well. I could maybe prune this as we approach summer. It bloomed exceptionally well this spring, but to kind of keep it blooming all throughout the year. We have some Mexican bush sage. I have some guara, which the other original plant died, so it's weird to have one here. I think 3 of them died and only 1 survived. But that also bloomed quite nicely this year. Got our mealy blue sage, which, you know, is looking a little tough after all that heat that came and went through, but it's been hanging in there. And, you know, I guess I could give it some supplemental water, but there is some rain on the forecast. So I think here, you know, patience is the name of the game for me. So I'm very proud of this pollinator garden. There might be some small bits and spaces where I might look to add some other ground cover. I do have some native Texas lantana in here, which has spent its blooms, at least for the moment. But likewise, another one that's tough. This place gets very direct, hot sun. And I've been quite happy with how it's looked this year. We'll work our way around the back here. Also should make note, you know, continuously is our live oak canopy up above us. You know, we got to have trees. I wish I could get them aged. If anyone has any tips for that in the Central Texas area, I would love to know. But gotta imagine some of these trees might be hundreds of years old. But I did actually work with excellent arborist. His name's Scott Anderson. His company, Urban Tree Canopy, is actually on the job for the upcoming Arboretum for Southeast San Antonio. Folks that I, you know, consider partners and that I've done a lot of work with before. Very excited about that project down there. I'm sure we'll be doing something else here in the future. But him and his company came out and did really exceptional work. The first time that we've had these trees really thoroughly assessed and pruned after the 5 years that we've lived on this property. And I highly recommend him and his team, Urban Tree Company. If you are looking for, you know, professionals who not just know about trees, but very much so care about trees. And so I'll provide a link down in the description below to Scott. And if you reach out to him, make sure you tell him that Corey sent you. One thing that I have some fun with here too, especially when you have no soil to speak of in some places, you know, that have added supplemental gravel and all that kind of stuff. This is a nice little combination for me that I put in with this older clay white pot. You can see some of the paint already fading, but you know, a combination of native plants in a pot that I like. And so this is early, so you'll see this spread a bit more, but the silver Ponyfoot, I put 2 of those plants in there, 1-gallon plants that will start to creep over the edge. You already see them doing it. I do have this little bit of a, you know, an Oya kind of wine bottle simulation here because I put it in when there was a bit of heat, and I really want that silver Ponyfoot to kind of take off and start crawling out there. It's usually not the best idea to put Oyas around, you know, native trees and things like that, because they might end up cracking that terracotta as the roots start to reach around it. But, you know, I will say if that breaks, that's not the end of the world for me. I just think it's a good kind of insurance policy for me right now to make sure this stays watered. One that I think is likewise a, you know, success story to talk about here. I have this otherwise likewise area that was, you know, just complete gravel, kind of bare earth. And as you can see here, I've strategically seeded our inland sea oats here in this little quadrant here. I did add some additional soil. Anyhow, another area, and maybe this is the last area that I'll show you for today. There's just too much to show and talk about. This back garden here, which is, you know, technically in front of our greenhouse. We've continued to have some good successes here. I have, you know, a rock rose underneath that woolly stemodia. I believe that's what that's called, that ground cover there. We got these green cloud Texas sage, which do bloom nicely on occasion. It's all overcast today, so you can't really tell the sun distribution. And I'm recording this, you know, earlier in the morning. But those will bloom for us, you know, now and again, especially as there's good humidity. Their, you know, nickname is the barometer bush. That's to, you know, let you know that there's a certain level of humidity in the air. That might mean rain. The rain may still not come. So a bit of that is, you know, kind of an old wives' tale, so to speak, as to the Texas sage really telling you that it's going to rain. Anyhow, Other things, you know, I like here, I do like this Esperanza, does quite well in this heat, and you know, it's in bloom for us, those beautiful yellow blooms. Quite a popular landscape plant here in San Antonio, at least, and I think really for good reason. I also have some, you know, more mealy blue sage here in the background that's done quite well, kind of at this, you know, terraced space here in our backyard, where, you know, it was quite lifeless, either just kind of a bunch of scrub and, you know, different weeds that sprouted up, you know, around this AC. Another thing that I want to talk about here, and this is why I probably won't ever plant any more inland sea oats on my property because I have more than enough, but off this AC condensation drip, this it was a 1 gallon inland sea oats plant that I put in here perhaps 2 years ago, is just absolutely nuts. And I think that's a lot of fun. It'll be something that I'll probably prune back. You can cut it back down a decent amount when you hit summer. And these will be tons of seeds. If anyone needs inland sea oat seeds, let me know. I have more than I could ever deal with and the birds could come keep up with. So let me know. I have some Mexican honeysuckle here, which not a native, but a well-adapted plant here. Nice, beautiful orange blooms, and I like that that's coming up here. There's a gap in here in this little terraced area that I'd love to put in some Greg's Mistflower. You know, it's an area that collects a little bit of extra moisture because of the slight slope, and the Mistflower absolutely takes off in sun with enough moisture, and so that I think that this kind of low point, it's a really smart plant to put in a low point like this, because you know the butterflies will be absolutely insane, specifically the queen butterflies. It's just a plant that's absolutely so full of life. A lot to cover, so much that I couldn't. We just have, you know, kind of too much space to work with, and from, you know, someone who loves plants and getting out here and putting new things in the ground, good problem to have, so I'm not complaining. Anyhow, last thing before we finish up here, just want to remind you to check out the free email mini course if you are interested, about the 7 things that I wish I had known before I got started with Texas native plant landscaping. Hope to share, you know, some of my best lessons there with you. I am an astute and obsessive researcher, and so I think that, you know, that can save you a lot of time. And along those lines, if it's something that, you know, you feel like you want to dive deeper into right from the get-go, check out the workshop. Again, it is paid, but if you do and get signed up now, you know, as soon to the publication of this video as possible, you can ask me your specific questions and I will answer your question directly with a bonus Q&A session. So check those out. Links will be in the description below. And with that, y'all, I really appreciate you taking the time here to spend with me in my garden in San Antonio, Texas. Until next time.